On a busy summer morning outside Buckingham Palace, David Chen stood among the crowds of tourists, his unruly German shepherd, Max, pulling hard against his leather leash. The 23-year-old software developer from Vancouver had always dreamed of visiting London's famous landmarks, but his intentions that day were far from respectful. Chen had spent the previous night in his hotel room watching viral videos of tourists teasing the Queen's Guard. The sight of these stoic figures, dressed in their iconic red uniforms and tall bearskin hats, had sparked a mischievous idea in his mind. He wanted to create his own viral moment, regardless of the consequences or dignity of the guards. The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds as Chen positioned himself near the guard post. Staff Sergeant James Wilson stood at attention, his polished boots gleaming and his rifle perfectly positioned against his shoulder. With 15 years of service under his belt, Wilson had seen his fair share of disrespectful tourists, but he maintained his professional composure regardless of the situation. Chen pulled out his new iPhone 15 Pro, making sure it was recording as he deliberately loosened his grip on Max's leash. The German shepherd, already excited by the crowds and unusual environment, began showing signs of agitation. Several nearby tourists noticed Chen's behavior and started moving away, some shaking their heads in disapproval. "This is going to be epic," Chen whispered to himself, adjusting his baseball cap and designer sunglasses. He had completely ignored the numerous warning signs posted around the palace grounds. "Keep dogs leashed at all times and maintain respectful distance from the Queen's Guard." A group of British schoolchildren on a field trip watched with concern as Chen moved closer to the guard post. Their teacher, Mrs. Thompson, quickly guided them away from the developing situation, muttering under her breath about foolish tourists who should know better. Max's ears were now perked forward, his attention fully focused on Staff Sergeant Wilson's tall bearskin hat. The dog's body language changed noticeably, his tail raised high, and a low growl emerged from his throat. Any experienced dog owner would have recognized these warning signs, but Chen was too focused on his phone's recording to notice or care. The morning tour buses were arriving, depositing more tourists onto the grounds. Many of them immediately noticed the unfolding scene and began taking out their own phones, though their intentions were different from Chen's. They sensed something was about to go wrong and wanted to document it. Staff Sergeant Wilson remained perfectly still, but his years of experience had taught him to be acutely aware of his surroundings while maintaining his ceremonial stance. Through his peripheral vision, he could see the tourists with the increasingly agitated German shepherd moving closer, deliberately pushing the boundaries of acceptable behavior. Two palace security officers in plain clothes had also noticed the situation and were slowly making their way through the crowd. They had dealt with numerous similar incidents before, but something about Chen's deliberate provocations and the size of his poorly controlled dog made them particularly concerned. The air was thick with tension as Chen, still filming with one hand, used his other hand to guide Max closer to the guard. The German shepherd's growls grew louder, drawing more attention from the gathering crowd. Some tourists began to voice their concerns, with one elderly British woman loudly declaring, "Someone needs to stop this foolishness before it gets out of hand." A light breeze ruffled the red plume on Wilson's bearskin hat, catching Max's attention even more. The dog's muscles tensed visibly under his thick fur, and his growls turned into sharp, aggressive barks. Chen, instead of pulling his dog back, continued to edge closer while narrating to his phone camera in an excited whisper, "Watch this, guys. This is going to be the best guard video ever." Little did Chen know that his quest for social media fame was about to take a turn he hadn't anticipated. The next few moments would not only become viral content, but would also serve as a harsh lesson about respect, responsibility, and the serious consequences of treating dedicated servicemen as mere entertainment. As the morning sun climbed higher over Buckingham Palace, the scene was set for what would become a memorable example of instant karma, leaving an indelible mark on both the foolish tourist and the countless witnesses gathered around the palace gates. The tension around Buckingham Palace's guard post escalated as Chen continued his reckless pursuit of viral fame. His phone held high, he began making small clicking sounds with his tongue, deliberately trying to get Max more excited. The German shepherd's barks echoed across the palace grounds, drawing even more unwanted attention to the scene. Staff Sergeant Wilson maintained his ceremonial stance, but his mind was racing through the protocol steps he'd been trained to follow. In his 15 years of service, he faced countless provocations, But a large, agitated dog presented a unique threat that required careful handling. "Come on, Max, show everyone how brave you are." Chen encouraged his dog, completely oblivious to the dangerous situation he was creating. The crowd had now formed a wide circle around them, with many tourists filming the unfolding drama on their phones. Some were audibly expressing their disapproval, while others watched in nervous anticipation. Sarah Mitchell, an American tourist who happened to be a professional dog trainer, pushed her way forward through the crowd. "Sir, you need to control your dog," she called out to Chen. "Those are stress signals he's showing. This could end badly." But Chen simply waved her off, too absorbed in his recording to heed her warning. The palace security officers were now moving more quickly through the crowd, but the sea of tourists made their progress frustratingly slow. They could see that the situation was deteriorating rapidly, as Max's aggressive behavior intensified with each passing moment. Chen's social media ambitions had completely clouded his judgment. He began narrating louder for his video. "Look at this, guys, the guard can't move. This is going to get so many views." His voice, filled with misplaced excitement, only served to agitate Max further. The German Shepherd's body language had become increasingly threatening. His hackles were raised, teeth bared, and his powerful body was coiled like a spring ready to release. Several children in the crowd began crying, frightened by the dog's aggressive display. A light drizzle had started to fall, creating a slick sheen on the cobblestones. Chen, still focused on his phone screen, failed to notice how the wet ground was affecting his already tenuous control over Max. The leather leash was slipping in his grip as he continued to edge closer to Staff Sergeant Wilson. Two Japanese tourists, who had been peacefully photographing the palace architecture, quickly packed away their expensive cameras and retreated to a safer distance. "This is most disrespectful," one whispered to the other in Japanese, shaking his head at Chen's behavior. The morning palace tour guide, Amanda Brooks, had stopped her group at a safe distance, using the unfolding scene as an impromptu lesson in what not to do at Buckingham Palace. "This, ladies and gentlemen," she said quietly to her group, "is exactly the type of behavior that disrespects our traditions and puts everyone at risk." Max's barking had now reached a fever pitch, and he began lumbering against his leash with increasing force. Chen, still thinking this would make excellent footage, failed to notice how his dog's aggressive behavior was affecting other nearby animals. A horse from the Royal Mounted Police unit stationed nearby started showing signs of distress. Staff Sergeant Wilson could feel the vibrations of Max's barks through the cobblestones beneath his boots. His training had prepared him for many situations, but he knew the next few moments would require perfect timing and execution of protocol. The palace's resident ravens, usually unperturbed by tourist activity, had taken flight from their perches, disturbed by the commotion. Their dark wings cast fleeting shadows over the scene as they circled overhead, adding to the ominous atmosphere. Chen, emboldened by what he perceived as great content for his video, decided to push his luck even further. "Maybe we can get him to jump," he said into his phone's microphone, taking another step forward. The leash was now almost fully extended, with Max just a few meters from Staff Sergeant Wilson's position. The security officers had finally reached the outer edge of the gathered crowd, but they could see they wouldn't make it in time to prevent what was about to unfold. The head officer quickly radioed for additional backup, knowing that the situation had reached a critical point. As the rain continued to fall gently on the palace grounds, the scene was set for a moment that would soon teach Chen a harsh lesson about respect, responsibility, and the consequences of treating a serious institution as a source of entertainment. What happened next would not only go viral but would serve as a cautionary tale for tourists for years to come. The situation at Buckingham Palace reached its breaking point as Chen made his most reckless decision yet. Believing he needed something more dramatic for his video, he deliberately slackened his grip on Max's leash, allowing the agitated German Shepherd even more freedom to threaten Staff Sergeant Wilson. "Come on, boy, show everyone how scary you can be," Chen called out, his voice filled with misguided excitement. The crowd gasped collectively as Max lunged forward, his powerful body straining against the wet leather leash. Several tourists quickly backed away, pulling their children behind them. Staff Sergeant Wilson, following years of strict protocol, executed the first warning perfectly. His voice boomed across the palace grounds with military precision. "Stand back from the Queen's Guard." The command was clear and authoritative, causing several nearby pigeons to take flight in surprise. Chen's reaction, however, was far from appropriate. He laughed, turning his phone to capture his own face in a selfie-style shot. "Did you guys hear that? He actually spoke. This is gold." His momentary distraction proved costly, as Max used this opportunity to pull even harder against the leash. The palace security team had finally reached the inner circle of onlookers, but they paused momentarily. Years of experience had taught them that rushing in might only escalate the situation further. They watched intently, ready to intervene at the perfect moment. Margaret Blackwood, an elderly British woman who had been visiting the palace daily for 20 years, couldn't contain her outrage any longer. "Young man," she called out in a stern voice that carried surprising authority, "you're making a terrible mistake." But her warning fell on deaf ears as Chen continued his performance for the camera. The rain had intensified slightly, creating small puddles on the cobblestones. Max's paws slipped slightly on the wet surface, causing him to become even more agitated. His barks had taken on a deeper, more threatening tone that experienced dog owners in the crowd recognized as a precursor to aggressive action. Staff Sergeant Wilson remained outwardly stoic, but his trained senses were acutely aware of every movement around him. He could hear the whispered preparations of his fellow guards nearby, ready to assist if the situation demanded it. The weight of his rifle against his shoulder served as a reminder of the serious nature of his duty. Chen, still narrating for his video, took another step forward. "Watch this, followers. We're going to see if we can make him move." The foolishness of his words drew audible groans from the crowd, and several people began recording the scene, sensing that karma was about to make its appearance. Max's behavior had become increasingly erratic. The combination of the rain, the crowd's energy, and his owner's encouraging tone had pushed the dog into a state of high arousal, his powerful jaws snapped at the air as he continued lunging toward the guard. The palace's atmosphere had transformed completely. What usually was a place of ceremonial dignity had become a scene of tension and mounting concern. Even the usual background sounds of tourist chatter and camera clicks had died down, replaced by an anticipatory silence broken only by Max's aggressive barking. Sarah Mitchell, the American dog trainer, had managed to position herself closer to Chen. "Your dog is giving every warning sign possible," she called out urgently. "This isn't a game anymore." But Chen simply turned his camera toward her, thinking her concern would add drama to his video. The security team had now strategically positioned themselves around the scene. They exchanged knowing looks, recognizing that intervention would be necessary soon. Their radios crackled quietly with updates from other palace security personnel converging on the location. Just then, a loud tour bus horn from outside the palace gates startled Max, causing him to lunge with unprecedented force. Chen, his hands still more focused on filming than controlling his dog, felt the wet leash begin to slip through his fingers. The crowd's collective intake of breath seemed to freeze the moment in time. Staff Sergeant Wilson could see the situation unfolding in his peripheral vision. His decades of training had prepared him for this exact moment, though he had hoped never to need such preparation. As Max's leash slipped further from Chen's grasp, the guard knew that the next few seconds would determine how this increasingly dangerous situation would end. The stage was now set for a dramatic conclusion that would teach Chen a lesson he would never forget and provide the internet with a viral video, though not the one he had hoped to create. In a split second that seemed to stretch into eternity, Max's leash finally slipped completely from Chen's grasp. The wet leather strap hit the cobblestones with a soft slap, and the German shepherd lunged forward with newfound freedom. The crowd's collective gasp echoed across the palace grounds as the situation spiraled out of control. Staff Sergeant Wilson, in one fluid motion that spoke of years of training, shifted his stance ever so slightly. His voice rang out with commanding authority. "Make way for the Queen's Guard." The traditional warning, delivered with unprecedented volume, caused Max to momentarily hesitate, his ears flicking backward in surprise. Chen's phone continued recording, but his smug expression had vanished, replaced by sudden realization and fear. "Max, come back." He called out weakly, but his previous encouragement of the dog's aggressive behavior had destroyed any chance of obedience. The German shepherd was now focused entirely on the guard, muscles coiled and ready to spring. The palace security team sprang into action, moving with coordinated precision. 2 officers quickly began clearing civilians from the immediate area, while others moved to intercept Max. However, the wet ground and the dog's agility made their task challenging. Sarah Mitchell, the American dog trainer, had pulled a treat from her pocket and was attempting to distract Max, but the dog was too aroused to notice. "He's in full predator mode now," she called out to the security team. "Be careful." Our professional assessment of the situation only added to the tension. The rain continued to fall, creating a cinematic mist that refracted the morning light. Tourist cameras flashed from every direction, capturing what was quickly becoming a legendary palace incident. Several onlookers had their phones up, live streaming the unfolding drama to various social media platforms. Chen made a desperate lunge for the trailing leash, but his designer sneakers provided little grip on the wet cobblestones. He slipped, landing hard on his knee, his expensive phone clattering across the ground, but surprisingly still recording. His fall seemed to trigger something in Max's predatory instincts. The German Shepherd, seeing his owner go down, became even more agitated. His barks turned into deep growls as he began circling Staff Sergeant Wilson, who maintained his position with remarkable composure. The guard's eyes remained forward, but every muscle in his body was prepared to react. A palace tour guide had quickly ushered her group behind one of the ornate gates, where they watched in horror and fascination. In 30 years of conducting tours, she whispered to her group, "I've never seen anything quite like this." The mounted police nearby had positioned their horses to form a barrier, preventing other tourists from getting too close to the scene. The horses, well trained for crowd control, stood calmly despite Max's aggressive display. Chen had managed to get back to his feet, his designer jeans now soaked and muddy. The reality of his situation was finally dawning on him as he saw the security team closing in. His social media dreams had transformed into a nightmare of potential legal consequences and public humiliation. Staff Sergeant Wilson, still maintaining his post, could hear the rapid footsteps of his fellow guards approaching from behind. The situation had escalated beyond the simple tourist nuisance to a genuine security threat, requiring a coordinated response from the palace guard. Max, growing bolder with each passing second, began to close the circle around the guard. His previous barking had transformed into the more dangerous silent focus that often precedes an attack. The dog's ears were pinned back, and his teeth were fully exposed. The head of palace security, watching from the command center through surveillance cameras, had already initiated emergency protocols. Additional guards were being dispatched, and the Metropolitan Police had been notified of the situation. The crowd had grown larger despite security's efforts to disperse them. The promise of dramatic footage was too tempting for many to resist. Their phones formed a glowing ring around the scene, capturing every moment of Chen's spectacular lapse in judgment. Just then, Max made his move. The German Shepherd gathered himself, muscles bunching under his wet fur, preparing to launch himself at Staff Sergeant Wilson. The guard, who had been waiting for this moment, took a single, measured breath. What happened next would become one of the most widely shared videos in palace history, though not for the reasons Chen had originally hoped. In a moment that would be replayed millions of times on social media, Max launched himself towards Staff Sergeant Wilson. The German Shepherd's powerful legs propelled him through the rain-filled air, his jaws open and aimed at the guard's ceremonial uniform. However, Wilson was more than ready for this attack. With precision that came from years of military training, Staff Sergeant Wilson executed a perfect parade ground stomp. His highly polished boots struck the cobblestones with a sound like a thunderclap, the noise amplified by the palace courtyard's acoustics. The unexpected sound and movement caused Max to twist mid-leap, his predatory focus completely shattered. The German Shepherd, his attack aborted, landed awkwardly on the wet stones. His momentum carried him sliding across the slick surface, right into the legs of his owner. Chen, still trying to capture everything on his phone, went down hard. His expensive phone flew from his hands, landing in one of the deeper puddles with a definitive splash. "My phone!" Chen cried out, his priorities still remarkably misplaced given the situation. He scrambled toward the puddle, only to be intercepted by two palace security officers who had been waiting for exactly this moment. They moved with practiced efficiency, securing both Chen and his now thoroughly chastened dog. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause, cheering for Staff Sergeant Wilson, who had managed to defuse the situation without breaking protocol or harming the dog. Several British onlookers could be heard making appreciate comments about proper training and showing these tourists how it's done. Max, his aggressive behavior completely deflated by the guard's authoritative response, had transformed into a confused and somewhat sheepish-looking dog. A female animal control officer who had arrived on scene quickly secured him with a proper restraint, noting how quickly his demeanor had changed. Chen's face had turned a deep shade of red as he was firmly held by security. His designer clothes were soaked and muddy, his phone was waterlogged, and his grand plans for social media fame had backfired spectacularly. The growing number of phones recording his humiliation ensured that he would indeed go viral, but not in the way he had intended. Sarah Mitchell, the American dog trainer, approached the animal control officer. That guard's response was perfect, she commented professionally. A sharp, unexpected noise like that can break a dog's aggressive focus without causing any harm, though it usually works better when the owner hasn't spent the last 15 minutes encouraging the aggressive behavior. The palace's head of security had arrived on scene, his expression stern as he surveyed the situation. He spoke quietly into his radio, coordinating with the Metropolitan Police who were now pulling up outside the palace gates. This incident would require formal charges, given the serious nature of the threat to a royal guard. Staff Sergeant Wilson maintained his position throughout the aftermath, though a slight smile might have been visible to those watching closely. His handling of the situation would later be used in training sessions as a perfect example of maintaining ceremonial dignity while effectively managing a serious threat. The crowd's phones were still recording as Chen was led away by police officers who had made their way through the palace gates. His protests about his waterlogged phone and his attempts to explain that it was just a joke fell on unsympathetic ears. Max, now securely leashed and muzzled by animal control, had become surprisingly docile. The professional handler easily led him toward a waiting van, where he would be evaluated before decisions were made about his future. Several dog owners in the crowd could be heard discussing how the dog's behavior had been entirely the result of his owner's irresponsible actions. As the rain began to ease, palace staff started dispersing the remaining crowd. Tour guides were already incorporating the incident into their narratives, using it as a perfect example of why the palace's rules about respectful behavior and proper pet control existed in the first place. The puddle containing Chen's phone continued to ripple in the light rain, the device's screen occasionally lighting up with notifications, likely from the videos of his misadventure already beginning to circulate online. The morning's events would serve as a lasting reminder that the Queen's Guard, while ceremonial, were still highly trained military personnel who commanded and deserved respect. Inside the Metropolitan Police Station near Buckingham Palace, Chen sat in an interview room, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. His once pristine clothes were still damp and muddy, and his ruined phone sat in an evidence bag on the table before him. Two serious-faced detectives entered the room, carrying a thick folder of witness statements and preliminary charges. "Mr. Chen," the senior detective began, "would you like to explain what possessed you to deliberately set an aggressive dog on a member of the Queen's Guard?" His tone was professional but carried an undercurrent of disbelief at the tourist's reckless behavior. Meanwhile, at the local animal control facility, Max was undergoing a thorough behavioral assessment. The veterinarian and animal behaviorist noted that without Chen's negative influence, the German Shepherd showed no inherent aggression. "This is clearly a case of an irresponsible owner encouraging dangerous behavior," the behaviorist wrote in her report. Back at Buckingham Palace, Staff Sergeant Wilson was giving his official statement to palace security. His commanding officer sat nearby, occasionally nodding with approval at the guard's description of how he handled the situation. "Textbook response, Wilson," the commander commented. "You'll be mentioned in the training manual after this." Social media was exploding with videos of the incident. Tourists who had captured the scene from various angles had uploaded their footage, and within hours, Chen's humiliation had gone viral. News organizations were already picking up the story, with headlines reading, "Tourist social media stunt backfires spectacularly at Buckingham Palace." In the police station's waiting area, Chen's parents were speaking with their son's hastily arranged lawyer. Their faces showed a mixture of embarrassment and concern as the lawyer explained the potential consequences. "We're looking at multiple charges," the lawyer explained. "Endangering public safety, causing a disturbance at a protected site, and potential violations of the Royal Protection Act." The animal control officer assigned to Max's case was reviewing Chen's history as a dog owner. She discovered that this wasn't the first time Chen had encouraged aggressive behavior for social media content, though it was certainly his most serious offense. Her report would play a crucial role in determining whether Chen would be allowed to keep his pet. Outside the police station, journalists had begun to gather. The story had struck a chord with the public, particularly coming at a time when discussions about responsible social media behavior and respect for traditional institutions were already making headlines. In a small office at the palace, the head of security was reviewing the incident with his team. "We need to update our protocols," he noted, though Wilson's response was exemplary. This could have been much worse if he hadn't maintained his composure. Chen's social media accounts were being flooded with negative comments. His previous posts, which showed a pattern of increasingly risky behavior for views, were being scrutinized and widely criticized. His attempt at fame had succeeded, but not in the way he had hoped. The tourists' embassy had been notified of the situation, and a consular official was en route to the police station. The incident was rapidly becoming a diplomatic embarrassment, with potential implications for tourist behavior guidelines at royal sites across the United Kingdom. In the animal control facility's exercise yard, Max was showing his true temperament, playful and well-mannered when not being encouraged to misbehave. The staff had grown fond of him, with one handler commenting, "He's actually a lovely dog." Such a shame his owner used him as a prop for social media attention. The palace gift shop reported a sudden surge in sales of guard-related merchandise, as tourists who had witnessed the incident wanted souvenirs of their unexpected excitement. Several were overheard recounting the story, with Staff Sergeant Wilson's response receiving particular praise. As evening approached, Chen remained in custody while the various agencies involved coordinated their response to the incident. His lawyer had advised him that the consequences would likely include significant fines, possible travel restrictions, and mandatory responsible pet ownership classes if he hoped to retain custody of Max. The day's events had created a ripple effect throughout London's tourist security protocols, with other major attractions reviewing their procedures for handling similar situations. Chen's ill-conceived attempt at viral fame had inadvertently sparked a broader conversation about social media responsibility and respect for cultural institutions. 1 month after the infamous Buckingham Palace incident, the consequences of Chen's actions have fully unfolded. Sitting in his Vancouver apartment, he stared at the stack of legal documents and fines totaling over £15,000. The viral fame he had sought had indeed come, but as a cautionary tale that continued to circulate on social media platforms worldwide. Max, the German Shepherd, had found a new home with Sarah Mitchell, the American dog trainer who had witnessed the incident. After Chen was deemed unfit for pet ownership, Mitchell had applied to adopt Max, promising to rehabilitate him and use his story in her professional seminars about responsible dog ownership. Staff Sergeant Wilson had received a commendation for his handling of the situation. His response had been incorporated into the Queen's Guard training manual, and he now gave occasional lectures to new recruits about maintaining composure under unusual threats. The incident had even earned him a small promotion and a handwritten note of appreciation from a senior royal family member. Chen's social media presence had transformed dramatically. His accounts, once filled with attempts at viral stunts, now served as platforms for promoting responsible tourism and pet ownership. Part of his plea agreement had required him to create educational content about respecting cultural institutions and the consequences of social media-driven recklessness. The incident had sparked significant changes at Buckingham Palace. New barriers had been installed at guard posts, and more detailed signage about proper conduct with pets was prominently displayed. Tourist guides now specifically mentioned the Chen incident as a warning about the serious consequences of disrespecting palace protocols. In Vancouver, Chen attended mandatory counseling sessions focused on social media addiction and impulse control. His therapist noted significant progress as Chen began to understand the deeper issues that had driven his need for online attention. His parents, initially mortified by their son's actions, had supported his rehabilitation while ensuring he took full responsibility for his choices. Max, meanwhile, was thriving in his new home. Under Sarah Mitchell's expert care, he had become a demonstration dog for her training school, showing how proper handling could transform a dog's behavior. His story had become particularly popular among her clients, serving as a powerful example of how owner behavior directly influences pet conduct. The viral videos of the incident had evolved into educational material. Several tourism boards and pet owner associations had licensed the footage for training purposes. with Chen's permission, and all proceeds going to animal welfare organizations as part of his restitution agreement. Back at Buckingham Palace, tourist behavior had notably improved. The Chen effect, as staff had begun calling it, had created a ripple of awareness about respectful tourism. Visitors were more mindful of the guards' serious role, and incidents of harassment had decreased significantly. Chen's former followers had largely transformed into advocates for responsible social media use. His story was frequently cited in discussions about the real-world consequences of online attention-seeking behavior. Several documentary makers had approached him about featuring his story in films about social media's impact on modern behavior. The legal system had used Chen's case to establish stronger precedents for dealing with social media-motivated misconduct at historical sites. His fines and restrictions had set a new standard for consequences, sending a clear message to other potential troublemakers. As the one-year anniversary of the incident approached, Chen received an unexpected letter from Staff Sergeant Wilson. The guard's message was brief but impactful, acknowledging Chen's efforts to make amends and encouraging him to continue his journey of personal growth. This correspondence, which Chen framed in his apartment, served as a daily reminder of how one foolish decision for social media fame had changed the course of his life. The final twist in the story came when Chen's mandatory educational videos about the incident went viral, this time for the right reasons. His honest reflection on his mistakes and their consequences resonated with viewers worldwide, turning his moment of shame into a valuable lesson about responsibility, respect, and the real price of social media fame. As the sun set over Vancouver, Chen looked at a recent photo of Max thriving in his new home, realizing that sometimes life's hardest lessons come wrapped in the most embarrassing packages. His story had become more than just a viral moment. It was now a testament to accountability, redemption, and the importance of thinking before acting in our social media-driven world.